Hey everybody, Christian here. Before I start the podcast, I want to, I haven't done it in a few weeks, almost close to a month now. But before I get to the podcast and everything, I do want to address everything that's going on in the world. Again, I've been gone for a few weeks, so I haven't gotten a chance to do it here on this platform. Whether or not anyone listens or not, things still need to be said. I've been talking very little about it on my Twitter because honestly, I try to avoid Twitter as much as possible now in these last few weeks, just because of some of the videos that have been coming out. But, these last few weeks have been pretty tough and it's rough. And I mentioned it on my Twitter when everything started going, that I couldn't articulate the words to put together to say anything that hasn't already been said up until that point. And even now, it's hard to put into words after all these weeks that have happened to what's going on in the world today. It's tough. It's uncomfortable to talk about, but it's things that we need to talk about. It's things that we need to address. It's things that we need to learn. And if you're uncomfortable with it, good, because this is not a fun subject to talk about. As a person of color, I have thankfully not dealt with a lot of police. I have been pulled over before, but I know that's not true for everyone else. And everything that's been going on these last couple of weeks, everything that's been said, everything that's been done, this movement, it's not just a hashtag, it's a movement. And it is a movement that is, finally, getting the attention of not just a few select people. It is finally getting the attention of everybody. Whether you like it or not, it is finally getting the attention that it deserves. And rightfully so. I don't have anything written down. When I knew the podcast was going to come back this week, I've thought of things to say and, kind of rehearsed them a little in my head, I'm going to be honest. But now that I'm sitting here, everything that I wanted to say has been said already and to such better degree. And saying that we need to do better, there's only so many times you can say that before, that small, very small part of you, way back deep, no matter how many layers you put between you and what you really want, is going to say, yeah, you could do better, but will it actually happen? And there are things that are happening now, thankfully, that are doing so. And obviously we have to wait a little bit to see if that actually works. Hopefully it does. And just, hopefully it does. And then, I've mentioned this on the podcast before, I'm not the most optimistic person in the world, but it's the little things that are happening now that are making me not the most optimistic person in the world, but slightly more optimistic than I have been. And obviously we have a very, very long ways to go. And we have to do it ourselves. It's not something that's going to be fixed within the system, because obviously the system is working against us and against, that certain particular group of people. It's not going to come from the person that should be saying something inspirational, should be saying something that brings us all together. Instead, he wants to antagonize and be hypocritical and wants his photo ops and anything else negative you can say about him that has already been said. And then I don't want to say here, because he's not part of the conversation. He's not part of the important part of the conversation that should be had. But, everything that's been going on, the peaceful protests being broken up brutally by police, here in the city of Chicago. Recently we had a news story breakout yesterday. It was yesterday. I'm recording this early Friday. We had a story breakout yesterday here in Chicago of a group of police officers sleeping or just relaxing and just chilling in a congressman's or an alderman, I can't remember which one, but they were sleeping and just lounging around in a politician, I'll just say politician, in a politician's office that had one window broken and everything else around the neighborhood was being looted. Mayor was not very happy about that, and everyone has their opinions on the mayor, and everyone has their opinions on the governor. But the cops are in this spotlight right now. And, there was that guy from New York saying that, the media and the press and everyone else should stop vilifying them. They should stop treating them with disrespect. Well, yeah, but stop doing, you need to be accountable as well for all the police officers who are doing shitty things. I know there are things that I have forgotten to say that I wanted to say about everything, but all I can say right now is yes, we need to do better. Yes, we need to be better. So hopefully this movement continues. Hopefully this movement, leads to more changes. And yeah, I can't think of anything else right now that hasn't already been said and been done. And to all the people out there who are uncomfortable with this, to all the people who think that it's still okay to say negative things, to say racist things, to say hurtful things, to be angry at TV networks for blacking out their screens for 8 minutes and 47 seconds, to be angry and say that you're scared and how dare you, and that's not the platform to do it on, and then my children were scared. Good. They should be. As much as that makes me sound like an ass, they should be. Because if your children are afraid and they are frightened and they are whatever else emotion that you want to put them on, if they're old enough to understand that, then they're old enough to have the conversation. The conversation of race, the conversation of things you should do and shouldn't do and say and shouldn't say to a certain group of people, to anybody for that fact. Doesn't matter the color of their skin. Doesn't matter, where they are on the spectrum. It doesn't matter where they, doesn't matter, what sexuality they identify with. If they're old enough to understand that there is a blackout happening and that they are afraid and frightened and whatever else, then they're old enough to have that conversation. You don't want to have that conversation with them. But if they're old enough to have that and you notice that, then they're old enough to have that conversation. They were frightened for 8 minutes and 47 seconds or 37 seconds, whatever it was. Try amplifying that a lot by the highest number you can possibly think of. Try amplifying that with all those emotions, wrap them into one from the moment they step out that door to the moment they step back in to their safe space. And even then, we know that is not always the case. All right, that's all I'm going to say. I feel myself getting angry, and I don't want to do that right before I start recording all the podcasts. But that's the state we live in now. We're either angry, we are motivated. All in all, we need to just listen, understand, learn, and everything else to understand what's really going on, to understand the real situation. All right, that's it. Let's start the podcast.
Now, shall we begin?
And here we go.
Let the games begin.
All right.
A new age has begun. An age of freedom.
This is Sparta!
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
You had my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
Get to the chopper!
This is going to be quite a ride.
All right, let's start the podcast, everybody. This is, of course, the Movie Pet Podcast, where I talk about all of the big breaking movie news items that have come out throughout the week. This is usually where I also say this is where we talk about the movie trailers, although there was a movie trailer this week, so we'll talk about that. There's also the part where I say we'll talk about the movies that are coming out this weekend. However, that is not the case. Unless you live in an area where there's drive-through, then, drive-through theaters are making a comeback, at least for now. Let's hope they stick around afterwards. But hello, everybody. I am Christian, your host for the Movie Pet Podcast. Let's get right to it. I apologize for missing the last few weeks. That's just been stuff's come up, even though I'm in quarantine. We're stuck at home as stuff still surprisingly comes up that makes me miss a podcast. So I apologize for that. But the podcast is back. This is supposed to be the big change for me podcast wise. I was thinking about making some changes to the podcast, but I've kind of had to delay that a little bit with the circumstances. Although circumstances do make it better, but that's just move past that for right now. All right. I'm going to try to keep this as upbeat as possible, considering everything that's going on in the world. But let's get to the podcast. We'll talk about that trailer that came out this week. And that trailer was, of course, the first teaser for the long-awaited Bill and Ted Face the Music. And it doesn't look too bad. It's just a short teaser. We kind of got the gist of what the movie's going to be about. We got just, a little bit of what's going on. Original screenwriters Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson are returning to write the script with a story they crafted with stars Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter. The new film picks up years later as Bill and Ted have reached middle age and still haven't written a song that will save the world. They then set off on an adventure to the future, and from the trailer, or the teaser I should say, They want to steal the song from themselves, and although it looks like that may not totally be the case, there are just, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some hijinks that ensue. They are also joined by their daughters, played by Samara Weaving and newcomer Bridget Lundy Payne. The movie was directed by Dean Parasite, who directed Galaxy Quest, which is a movie I love very, very much. And some of the co-stars include Kirsten Shaw, Jillian Bell, Anthony Carrigan, and the returning William Sadler as Death. Bill and Ted Face the Music will open on August 21st, hopefully, although a lot of movie theaters are now opening up this month. The teaser looks fine. There's that brief tidbit at the end where Bill and Ted go to the future and they end up in a prison and they looked at jacked versions of themselves, which is, oh man, that was a sight to see. But I'm excited. It's a teaser, so it's just enough. But I definitely want to see a full-blown trailer to see how all this turns out. But teaser-wise, worked very well. All right, let's move on to the movie news items of the week. Some quick-fire movie. No, I'm going to put all these in the movie news item, but some of these will just kind of act as quick-fire movie news items. Keke Palmer will executive produce and star in the historical thriller Alice. The movie is surprisingly inspired by true events of a woman of servitude in 1800s Georgia who escapes the 55-acre confines of her captor to discover the shocking reality that exists beyond the tree line. It's actually 1973. So that sounds very interesting. Kirsten Vera Linden will make her directorial debut. She will also direct off her own script and plans to start filming in August in Georgia now that Hollywood is opening up productions all around the world. Elisabeth Moss is set to star in Handmaid's Tale's director Diana Reed's new feature film, Run, Rabbit, Run. The movie was written by novelist Hannah Kent. Moss will also produce the movie, and she will play a fertility doctor who believes firmly in life and death, but after noticing the strange behavior of her young daughter, she must challenge her own values and confront a ghost from her past. Reed has also directed episodes for other big shows like Amazon's Upload, an SBS series called Sunshine, I don't know what that is, and the HBO series The Outsider. Of course, they work together on Hulu's massive hits, Handmaid's Tale, and of course Moss is coming off The Invisible Man that came out earlier this year. So, nice little reunion for them. Jake Gyllenhaal is set to produce and star in the adaptation of the graphic novel Snowblind. The movie will be directed by Gustav Moeller. I think that's how you pronounce the last name. He's not an American, obviously, but he will be making his English language debut for the movie. Ironically, Gyllenhaal is also attached to star in the American remake of Moeller's film The Guilty. So it's a nice little thing going on there. The graphic novel follows a boy who discovers that his family is in the witness protection program and is being described as a cross between prisoners, which ironically also starred Jake Gyllenhaal, and the 1988 drama Running on Empty, which starred River Phoenix as a young man whose parents are fugitives. So, very interesting concept. I never read Snowblind. I want to say I heard about it, but I may be confusing it with something else. Gyllenhaal has only one other lead starring film on his docket right now, which is the adaptation of the video game movie The Division, which will star Jessica Chastain and will be directed by David Leitch. Other than that, Snowblind will be directed by Patrick Ness, but no word yet on when production will start. Again, now that Hollywood's opening up, there's a lot of question marks on what's going to start opening up and what's going to start filming. Moving on, Jessica M. Thompson, who directed the critically acclaimed The Light of the Moon, is set to direct the horror thriller The Bride for Screen Gems. The story follows a young woman who attends a lavish destination wedding, unwary of the horrors that await. Thompson's The Light of the Moon starred Stephanie Beatrice. I believe is she the one from Brooklyn Nine-Nine? I could be wrong about that. That sounds right, but I don't watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine enough to know. Anyway, the movie itself, again, critically acclaimed, also won the Attendance Award for Best Narrative Feature at the 2017 South by Southwest Film Festival, and put her on the radar for every studio in Hollywood. She also recently directed 6 episodes of the upcoming TV series The End. I didn't put down where you can watch that, but pretty sure if you look that up, you'll see what it is. The movie's original script was written by Blair Butler, who wrote horror films like Polaroid, Hellfest, and the in-development horror film The Steps. She was also part of G4, the network, for a long time as well. That's kind of where I know her from. But revisions were done by Thompson Emil Gladstone, who wrote The Curse of La Llorona. Butler will also be producing the movie as well. I forgot to mention that. So, sounds interesting. We don't know. Obviously, with The Curse of La Llorona, everyone's like, oh, is it going to be, connected to The Conjuring? No, it's done by a different company, so don't worry about that. All right. And as for The Light of the Moon, I've heard some pretty good things about it. I've heard some mixed reaction for it, but everyone that I kind of really trust has had nothing but good things to say about it. So hopefully this turns out really great. All right, let's move on to a somewhat tone-deaf announcement, considering what their previous work together and how everyone's still kind of mad about this particular movie. A Green Book reunion is in the works, as Viggo Mortensen is in negotiations for a key supporting role in director Peter Farrelly's next film, which is being entitled The Greatest Beer Run Ever. Now, the movie is based on the true story of John Chicky Donahue, which is also based off a book by the same name by Donahue and J.T. Malloy, if you want to go check that out. So the movie is based on the true story of John Chicky Donahue, who traveled from New York to Vietnam in 1967 just to share a few beers with his childhood buddies who were fighting in the army overseas. This movie was previously announced before. It was announced last year in April, but it's been pretty quiet since then. And again, no word on who Mortensen will play, but since he's not playing the lead, who knows who will play. But again, this is kind of tone deaf a little bit, considering how Green Book was, at first praised, and then as people, slowly started watching everything else and slowly started realizing maybe not the best example of what's going on, especially nowadays. So there is that. So there you go. There is that. Kaitlyn Dever, who recently appeared in Booksmart and the Netflix series, what was it called? Unbelievable, which I hear is very good. Have not watched it yet, but Kaitlyn Dever is in talks to join the Universal Pictures adaptation of the hit Broadway show Dear Evan Hansen as the female lead. There you go. Got a little tongue-tied there. The story follows a high school student, Evan Hansen, who gets caught in a lie when one of his letters is mistaken for a classmate's suicide note. That leads to Evan to start a relationship with the classmate's family, including the boy's sister, Zoe, which will be played, maybe, she's still in talks, by Dever, who he begins to date. Going a little fast. I apologize for that. So the show's star Ben Platt, because this was a Broadway show. It was a book first, and then it was a Broadway show, and there have been talks pretty much since the show kind of started getting a good word of mouth that they've been working on it to make a movie. So the show's star Ben Platt is expected to reprise his role as Evan Hansen, although that is yet to be confirmed. Steven Chbosky, who directed The Perks of Being a Wallflower, is directing the movie, which was written by Steve Levinson, who happens to have written the book that the Broadway show, and now that the movie will be based on. So there you go. I have not seen the show. I have heard nothing but great things about it. I know a lot of people who have watched it have praised it severely, so hopefully they don't mess it up. But considering they have the writer of the book and the Broadway show, and now they're going to bring him on board to write the movie, I'm pretty sure it's in good hands. So there you go. All right, let's move on to the next movie news item. I am talking way too fast. Let me slow down a little bit. All right, so here's the next movie news item. Something that's a bit surprising considering the circumstances around it. The Bride of Frankenstein is apparently still in the works over at Universal Pictures. Collider.com spoke to David Coep. I think that's how you say his name. I always pronounce his name as Coep. I don't know if that's actually how you say it, but that's how I say it. Anyway, he's been a writer for so long. He Jurassic Park is the thing that immediately pops in my head, even though he's written a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, he has a new Blumhouse movie called You Should Have Left, coming out later this month on VOD with Kevin Bacon and Amanda Seyfried. It's pretty much kind of like a haunted house thriller. They released a trailer this week. Looked pretty spooky, so there is that. But anyway, they spoke to Coep and asked him about his Bride of Frankenstein movie that he was writing back in the day during the early days of the Dark Universe. And I mentioned it's a bit surprising earlier because, again, it was, like I mentioned, I just pretty much spoiled it, it was connected to the Dark Universe. So the now failed Dark Universe, I should say. So a little history. Bride of Frankenstein was originally supposed to be the second movie in the Dark Universe after Tom Cruise's The Mummy, and then it was scheduled for a February 2019 release with Bill Condon, who had just come off directing Disney's live-action Beauty and the Beast. He was set to direct, and Angelina Jolie was pretty much guaranteed to play the bride. But in October of 2017, the release was pulled from the release schedule. Dark Universe heads, or architects, as I read in Collider's report, Alex Kurtzman and Chris Morgan left, and the Dark Universe was pretty much dead since The Mummy was considered a failure, and it didn't have a lot of fanfare afterwards either. So everything pretty much was gone. Bride of Frankenstein, Frankenstein itself, just everything else that they were working on at the time. So Coep, in this interview, which Collider will be releasing sometime, I don't know if it's probably sometime next week or pretty soon, Coep said that Universal pretty much gave him the go-ahead to continue reworking on the script, and he actually said this, saying, quote, "I have a version now, and they have a version that we all really like. I have a version now, and they have a version now that we all really like. I think they're talking to directors now." So there is that. Then he went on to say that the movie won't be a big, massive budget film like The Mummy, but also it won't have a modest budget like The Invisible Man. He did say that the movie will still be set in present day. That was one of the big things about his script, that it will still be set in present day. So it's interesting that they are still going to go ahead and do The Bride of Frankenstein. Obviously, everything's been changing. The Invisible Man was the big stepping stone in all of this that was going on. Leigh Whannell did an awesome job. We talked about Elisabeth Moss earlier, and Blumhouse and Universal were both very dead set on not necessarily doing a universe again, but making these movies character driven, making these movies filmmaker driven, and they did an awesome job with The Invisible Man. They have a Dracula movie in the works with I forgot her first name. I forgot her last name too. The director of The Invitation, which you can go watch on Netflix. And Destroyer, which is the Nicole Kidman movie that came out I think a couple of years ago now. But they have her attached to that. She spoke on that briefly last week as well, saying that she may be making it a closer adaptation to the books, to the novel, I should say. Having different perspectives, not just having Dracula be the main character and having him, be at least one perspective, and having other perspectives in the movie. I thought that was kind of interesting that she even said that. But there's that. And then there was this movie news item that came out a couple weeks ago that was disappointing I didn't get to talk about. There's apparently a Ryan Gosling Wolfman movie in the works or in development or something to that effect that Universal's working on. So there is that also. And there apparently that Ryan Gosling was going to play kind of like this TV anchor or TV reporter, and that apparently there was talks about him potentially transforming into the Wolfman on camera. I think that was like one of the big things that was pitched. I don't know if that was real or not. I haven't looked up anything whether or not that's been updated and whether or not that's not true, but there is that. So it's interesting that they wanted to do that and they're going that route. But I like this new route that Universal and Blumhouse are taking. Blumhouse is, I don't know if Blumhouse is going to be attached to everything, but they were attached to Invisible Man and that kind of worked. So hopefully they go that route again. But if Universal wants to, take their own crack at it and do it themselves, they're more than happy to do that. David Cope is more than a capable screenwriter, and I'm sure if they have a director attached to the project at some point, I'm sure they'll find a good director. Maybe they'll get back Bill Condon and they'll try that over again. Obviously they won't have to worry about connecting it to a universe anymore because that's not happening anymore. But yeah, I'm down with this idea. I don't know if they're going to get Angelina Jolie back, but I think the idea of them still doing these Universal monster movies is awesome, because I always loved the Universal monster movies, and I was one of the first people that was on board the Dark Universe train, and then I saw The Mummy, and then I jumped off to my death, like pretty much like the Dark Universe. So there you go. All right, so let's talk about the last movie news item of the week, at least at the time of this recording, unless something obviously very big drops right as I press the end record button and as I'm editing. The much talked about Evil Dead 4 looks like it's officially happening. Speaking with Empire, Bruce Campbell, aka the face of Evil Dead, confirmed that the fourth entry is now titled Evil Dead Now, and that a writer-director has been attached. That writer-director is Lee Cornyn. I think that's how you say his last name anyway. He directed last year's The Hole in the Ground, which got some pretty big fanfare. And he was handpicked by Sam Raimi himself, of course, the man behind the franchise. So Cornyn will write and direct Evil Dead Now. He later confirmed that himself on Twitter. It wasn't just Bruce Campbell speaking about it, because Bruce Campbell has spoken about Evil Dead in the past, and sometimes things come to fruition and sometimes they don't. But Lee Cornyn did go on Twitter and confirm the news himself. So he is directing. The big thing here, maybe for fans, is that Campbell himself said that Ash Williams, his character, won't be part of the story, or at the very least not be a big part of the movie. Here's his whole quote saying, from this point forward, they kind of have to stand on their own, which is fine and liberating. You can have different heroes, different heroines in this cast. This is going to be a little bit more dynamic. We just want to keep the series current, and the mantra really is our heroes and heroines are just regular people. That's what we're going to continue. End quote. So there you go. Everything looks to be in the early stages, so obviously details beyond what Campbell said are very slim. So no word yet on if it will continue from the Evil Dead reboots, because there was rumors about that, or if it will continue the story from the Raimi movies, which also included the Starz series Ash vs. Evil Dead, which is very good. If you have not watched it, highly recommend you go check that out. Or maybe even a soft reboot. Maybe they'll just do maybe they'll have connections to both of them and have kind of their own little weird wacky timeline. Obviously timeline issues are not a problem in the Evil Dead movies, but only time will tell about this. I have not seen The Hole in the Ground. I've heard some mixed things about it. I know it was really big in the festival crowd, but outside the festival crowd, it's again getting a lot of mixed reviews. So I have not watched it yet. That is on my list of things I want to watch. But the fact that he was handpicked by Sam Raimi himself pretty much says something. because, Raimi has directed pretty much all the Evil Dead movies, of course, with the exception of the Evil Dead reboots, which took a more serious approach. Still having a little bit of fun, but took a more serious approach. He was also a hands-on producer on Ash vs. Evil Dead. So there is that, and the fact that they're going to go on and not have Bruce Campbell in it, and they're not going to have Ash Williams in it. Maybe not. It sounds like he's not going to be in the movie as Ash Williams. Maybe he'll make a little cameo or something, or he'll end up being in the movie as a different character. Who knows? But I kind of like this. I think this is cool. I think the fact that they're going to continue with the Evil Dead movies is fun. The Evil Dead movies have a very special place in a lot of people's hearts. They're still, it's the thing that made Bruce arguably. I'll put that in front of it just in case I piss anybody off. I know there's a lot of Bubble Teppa's fan. What was the name? I think I said it wrong. Anyway, I know there was I know Bruce Campbell. The thing that pretty much made him a household name was the Evil Dead movies, at least in my house. But I like this. I like they're going with a fresh star. Obviously, the reboot went with Fede Alvarez, who at that point no one really knew. And I think he had only done like one short. I don't think he actually had directed a movie until then. I think he was more kind of a behind the scenes guy, and he directed Evil Dead, and now he did Don't Breathe, which everyone was a huge fan of, and now he's going on and doing some other stuff, some other projects, some other big projects too, not just little projects. So it should be interesting to kind of see how this turns out. I'm a fan of the Evil Dead movies. I'm just very interested in seeing how this turns out and how this goes. Passing on the torch to someone else, from Raimi's baby and Bruce Campbell's baby as well, will be interesting. But I think it'll be rather telling. I think it will show that this franchise can continue and to grow, just with different people attached in the background. I'm sure Raimi and Campbell will have producer roles and to some extent, but this is pretty cool. All right. And that's it, everybody. That's all the movie news items I have for you guys. Again, at least at the time of this recording, if anything big drops, as I'm editing, obviously, this podcast, I will put it right here. And if not, then hopefully you guys have a very safe and fun weekend. Be good people. That is more prominent to say now more than ever. Be safe if you're, going out there and joining the movement and everything else. But all in all, just be safe, have fun, be good people. And as always, especially nowadays, there's some stuff coming out. I mentioned there's no stuff coming out in movie theaters. I know a lot of movie theaters are opening. I know the Spike Lee movie, The Five Bloods, comes out on Netflix this weekend. Artemis Fowl, I think, comes out on Disney Plus this weekend as well. So there's stuff coming out, but that's just not. I always do it movie theater wise, never really do a video on demand. So there is stuff coming out. There's the Spike Lee movie, The Five Bloods, which seems all but important now to watch. And of course, Artemis Fowl on Disney Plus as well. So there you go. Those are your releases this week, I guess. But yeah. So anyway, once again, thank you guys so much for listening. Go check out all the links down below to follow the rest of the podcast everywhere else. If you're listening to this on YouTube, you can go listen to it on Apple Podcasts. You can also listen to it on Stitcher. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave me a rating and review. I really appreciate it. It would show that someone's listening. Pretty much, that's pretty much it. I just want some confirmation that someone is listening to this podcast. But yeah, all right. I am done. Thank you so much for listening. Go have some fun out there, guys. And as always, go watch some movies.
Whoop whoop! Yeah! Give it up! Movies!